Professor Dr. Sujata Bhan. Because of her efforts, we could see the gathering of to more than 200 participants. In the proposal, they have set the right kind of objectives. The first objective is to critically examine the nuances of qualitative and quantitative research. Friends, uh, we since long we are in education domain, we know that sometimes people say being a teacher, it is necessary to throw a light on it. And from the first objective to the last objective, to write a well defined research proposal. Friends, my earnest request to all of you, you please learn very seriously how to prepare the proposal, because it is not only confined to this FDP, or it is not confined to your department, but whenever
To interrupt, can you please turn on your video? People would like to see you also, ma'am.
okay, hello, uh, you are getting my voice,
Very
Sujata?
clearly. Yes, very clearly. Just turn the video on. They
That
would
is
like.
very sorry. It also needs to be
Thank
focused
you, ma'am.
because it has some limitations. Definitely, if you ask me, madam, what is your opinion about this online teaching? So then I would definitely say it's not fully, we can say that learner centered. Because see, this stimulus variation is very important. Now, suddenly, my professor Sujata asked me, madam, there is request because people wants to see your face. Now, this face and facial are very important, and that is our teacher education stimulus variation. So when we lose these things in our teaching, then definitely everything will get vanished. So facial expressions are very important, and it gives life to the. So friends, definitely this program will enhance your knowledge, enhance your skill to select the topic. Even when we undertake any research, the first step is very important, and which is related to framing the topic. If we are very sure about framing the topic, then everything will go very well. Otherwise, it will create a problem. Sometimes what happens since long, since 87, ever since I been associated with all these domains of knowledge, and what is my experience through learning and through examining and through evaluating research proposals and research theses, I could learn many things. And there is one proverb: experience is an eye opener. We learn through smiles and tears. Yes, it is very true. And there it is necessary to have our concentration on framing the topic, writing the proposal, and the rest of the things are, of course, very important, because there is a difference between qualitative and quantitative research. But because of data and numericals, we classify these two types: quantitative research and qualitative research. But friends, I don't want to say much, because all the experts are nationally and internationally known. I know about Mukhopadhyay madam and Professor Sharma, Professor Gupta. They will throw light on all of the aspects of research. I am very much sure about the outcome of this faculty development program. And always we have to keep in mind, though the research may be applied research, may be action research, but research invents, or research gives a new solution to the problem. So therefore it is very important to learn, or to acquaint, or to get the things which are applicable to our research domain. And I am very much hopeful to bring some new things with through this FDP program, because all the experts, they are very much interested and keen to share their knowledge with you. So definitely you would enjoy this virtual faculty development program, and definitely you in the future you will contribute lot. Thank you very much. And definitely I would compliment colleague and Professor Dr. Sujata Bhan to have such kind of faculty development because you know the words, we do remember the words of Dr. Subodh Kumar. He said that this is happening for the first time. So definitely, Dr. Sujata Bhan, I wish you good luck. And I hope that in future also you will carry, you will undertake, you will design many more programs under the guidance of Dr. Subodh Kumar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Thank you for your.
Okay, bye.
Okay, so much. Thank you so much.
Professor Umesh Sharma is the professor in the Faculty of Education at Monash University, Australia, where he's the academic head of the Educational Psychology and Inclusive Education community. He has conducted many research programs in the area of disability and inclusive education, which span India, Pakistan, China, Bangladesh, Fiji, Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, and Samoa, as well as Australia, Canada, USA, and New Zealand. He has conducted several award-winning national and international projects on topics like funding of education for students with disability, for the Commonwealth of Australia, the Department of Personalised and Support Guideline for Victorian Government, and the development of the National Policy on Inclusive Education for Solomon Islands. He is the chief co-editor and of the Australian Journal of Special Education and the Oxford Encyclopedia of Inclusive and Special Education. He has authored over 150 academic articles, book chapters, and edited books that focus on various aspects of inclusive education. His project on the development of the specific indicators for inclusive education received the Zero Award for Outstanding Policy Development from the United Nations in Vienna 2016. He recently, in 2019, was named the top special education researcher in Australia based on the impact of his work locally and internationally by the Australian chief scientist. His main areas of research are positive behavior support, inclusive education for disadvantaged children, and policy and practice in special and inclusive education. I hand the session over to Professor Sharma right now. Thank you.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Just a very good morning. Child is trying in the back. I request again and again, please turn off your mics. Please don't. Thank you. Thank you. Namaskar, Umesh Sharma ji. Welcome, and thank you very much for joining in. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Yes,
नमस्कार सुजाता जी, नमस्कार आप सभी को. मैं हिंदी भी बोल सकता हूँ, तो I'll be using both English and Hindi to make sure that I'm accessible to all of you. सबसे पहले तो I would like to say, Sujata ji, thank you very much for introducing to such a vast group of people who are interested in learning more about research. So can I say I will also like to welcome this opportunity, but also want to say I'm privileged to be presenting to all of you. Dr. Subodh Kumar ji from RCI, you said such nice words, and I hope that we'll try to meet your expectations. Heard such nice things from the Vice Chancellor of SNDT, and Sashikala ji, she said so many nice things about this webinar, and I have a feeling you guys are going to do a very good job together. So my very first question when Sujata ji sent me an email, Umesh, we would like you to speak to the group And my very first question was, what is the topic and who are the participants? Because it's no point talking about a topic if I don't know who are going to be the people who are going to be listening to it. So what I have tried to do is create a presentation that I hope will be meaningful to all the people who are here. I'm thinking they are research scholars, they are academics, there are people who are going to start new projects, there are people who have already started projects. And so what I'm trying to do is to talk about a topic that will be helpful and meaningful to all of you. So I have a presentation I'll be sharing with all of you. If at any time you don't hear me, or if you have any questions, feel free to send it through the chat. And I'll try my best to stop and answer those questions as I go along. I'm not saying all the questions as I'm doing, maybe something that is not making sense to you when I'm talking about, I'm more than happy to stop briefly and explain what I want to say. So I'll share my slides and then we go from there. So please let me know if you can see my slides or not. Can you see my slides?
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. So as you can see, my topic is question your research questions. And I think for me, it's an extremely important question for all of us, people who are doing any kind of research. And before I start, I think this is a very unique time for all of us internationally. And I think I would like to start this by making prayers for people whose lives are affected by COVID-19 in India, in Maharashtra, throughout the world. I know it has just touched so many families. So my humble prayers to everyone and all of you. I think God will look after you, and hopefully our countries will come out of this thing. And let's pray that, that this unique opportunity provides our joint strength and working together to take us out of this difficult time. Incidentally, when things like this happen, we start looking for new opportunities, and COVID-19 has provided this good opportunity where we can learn from each other through online media. So SNDT, you have done a great job of connecting people throughout India as well as I think internationally, and hopefully we can make some sense of, to start a new journey about how to do a good research. So my topic is question your research questions. And before I start, I want to give you a little bit about my background from India. My roots are in India, and why I'm telling you, because as you might have seen or heard from my introduction, I go to Singapore, Fiji, and people ask me, are you from Fiji or Singapore? And many a time I have to remind them I'm from India. So my roots are in India. I did my bachelor's in mental retardation many years ago, 1990, but it looks a long time ago now. I did my M.Ed in special education from Kurukshetra University. I did my M.Ed in inclusive education from University of Melbourne in Australia, and the PhD also at the same university. So why I'm telling you all this thing, I think there are lots of people in India who provided me a very solid background in my studies. And there are a few of them who are going to be part of this. Dr. Jayanti Narayan is one of them. And she is such a great lecturer, and she taught me so many nice things. So I would like to acknowledge her contribution in where I am now. So I think it's important for us to recognize and acknowledge those people. There are lots of other people who are in this webinar, and I think you need to make good friends as well as when you are learning from them, it's a good opportunity for you to get connected with them and learn from them. So now I came to Australia in 1996, and why I just want to show you where I am in Victoria. So this is over here. Victoria is the southeastern part of Australia, and I don't know how many of you been to Australia. Australia is a very big country, almost like 2.5 times of India, but the population of India is very, very small. So if you can compare, there are two different countries. I just want to give you some perspective of where I'm coming from. And I think all of you or most of you might follow cricket. So Australians, there are two major sports that we play here, cricket as well as footy. And that's how I think people know everyone, people coming from Australia, they love their cricket. And I must say, I also love my cricket too. So I thought I should also tell you a little bit about myself. I am far away, like you guys are on the northern planet, northern hemisphere. We are in southern hemisphere. So some of you might be wearing, why I'm wearing a jacket here. It's very cold in this part of India, Australia. And I think in over there in India, it's very warm. So just to give you some perspective, but I also want to say I'm quite far away from you right now. It's like 10,000 kilometers. And it's even further during this time. If I have to travel, it will take few weeks for me to go to India because there are no flights right now. I think you already know all the flights are closed. So it's a different world right now from any other time in the past. I am based at Faculty of Education at Monash University. So this is my faculty actually. If you see the star over here, this is where my office. So if you come to Monash University, you'll be most welcome to visit me. I just want to tell you a little bit about our faculty. We are ranked #1 based on our research in Australia and ranked 12th in the world based on our research as well as student satisfaction and the work we do in this field. I think just a little bit of talking about our faculty or university is something it's important for you to know where we come from. Now, I think you guys did not come here to hear more about where do I do. That's not your interest. You are interested in the research topic, and that's what you are interested in. So as Subodhji talked about, as well as Sujataji talked about, it's important. You need to take a note of when I start presenting this talk. You need to really listen because there are 4 or 5 multiple choice questions. So I'm going to cover them, and hopefully I'll explain them really well so that you should be able to get them really well. But what I'm hoping that by going through this presentation, you'll learn more about how to do a good project and what makes a really good research question. I have 2 major focus in my presentation. It's not just research question, it is also about research problem, and they are quite interrelated topics for me. And I'll talk about both. And I think both of them, in some way, you should need to think about research question and research problem as like, it's like a Venn diagram. And within that Venn diagram, there is one place somewhere in between. So this talk is about both research question and research problems. And it's not a theoretical presentation. I'm not just reading books. I'm reading my own experiences. And that's what I'm going to do about. I will be talking about myself as a research student. What did I learn about research questions or research problems? Myself as an editor or an author, and myself as a supervisor or examiner of PhD students, but also examiner of research grants. So as you talked about now, I review articles for our journal, but also for Oxford University Encyclopedia. So I'm using all those perspectives when I'm talking to you. So there are 3 phases in my life, and you can see the very first phase is the chapter 1 of my life when Umesh came as a research student to Monash University. So that's where I used to have quite a lot of hair. As you can see, I used to wear glasses. So this is how I looked like that time. And then at mid-career research, and that's my chapter 2 of my life. When I became a researcher, I started writing articles and the advanced career. I think most of the things are right in the last career. I have lost quite a lot of hair now, but it clearly shows my journey. But I'm going to share what I've learned during those 3 phases about research questions or research problems. So very first question I have for you, if I was doing this in person, I'll ask all of you to think about what is the very first research question you might have wrote, like it's in your master's program or your doctoral program. What did you decide and how did you decide it? It's a very, very important question. When you came up with the question that you wanted to investigate, how did you start thinking about where did the journey start? Who guided it? And if I was doing this thing in a class, I'll ask people to write that question and share it with me. I don't know whether you can do it on this forum or not, but please go ahead and write those questions in the chat if you want to write it. Not a very long thing. I just want to get a gist of what are the kinds of questions you've been doing. What was the very first question you had written in your life? Okay, now I want to talk about my first research question. How did I decide? So my first question was, what problem does India face in including students with an intellectual disability in regular schools? So this is how I started, and I want to hear if I was doing this thing again in the class, I'll say, what do you think about my research question? But because I'm not doing it, so and very good to see some of you are writing your research questions. So thanks very much for all of you who are sharing your research question on the chat. It's great to see some of those responses. But I want you to look at my research question that I started with in 1996. So my question was, what problems does India face in including students with an intellectual disability in regular schools? And I shared this question with my PhD supervisor, Dr. Ishwar Desai, who has retired now, but he was a great supervisor. He taught me lots of very, very interesting things. And he says, Umesh, your question is too broad. It's too ambitious. It's not clear who are my participants. And he says, you are looking at problems. You're not looking at considerations, or you're not looking at the solutions. And you're also taking a deficit approach. And I think those are very, very interesting thing, because it made me think, okay, I mean, if my research question is not good, how can I improve it? What are the kinds of things I can do? So he asked me to go and attend some workshops on how to write a good research question. And those are very, very important workshops, because you learn something very interesting. Like, when you're writing a research question, what makes a good research question? And there are lots of things you can do as a researcher when you do it, and when you start doing your research. But there are some important things people talk about when you conduct a research. Your research question need to be very focused. Ideally speaking, your research question should have only one problem in your research question. It needs to be researchable. Sometimes our research question could be too broad, and then you say, how are you going to do it in 3 years? Do you have enough data? Where would you collect this data from? So that's the kind of question your supervisor will ask. Is it feasible? Because they say, well, your research question looks very good, but do you have enough time to finish this research question? Would you be able to do it in the time that you have available to do this question? Is it specific enough? Because sometimes your question could be too broad. It's not clear what you're trying to do. So when I said India in my question, it was so big, and India is a huge country. And I think what you needed to say, you need to be very specific. You need to say, oh, maybe I need to think about only some schools in Delhi, rather than thinking about all over India. What he says, there needs to be some degree of complexity. You don't want to be too simple. Your question needs to have something in addition to this, so that it makes some sense. But it needs to be very relevant too, because you need to say, if I'm going to research a problem, you need to say, why is this problem relevant to what's happening right now in India? Is there a policy happening right now in India that is relevant? And how will my question contribute to what's happening in India? So those were some of the good things that he shared with me. But I think this is some information you can also find, like, when this is more theoretical information. But what I'm going to share with you, which is even more important, and that's what I learned during my PhD. There is a research question and there is a research problem. And what I want to say is, you can write a really good research question, but if you did not think about the problem overall, research questions are not going to make any difference. So I want all of you to focus on the triangle right now. If you look at the triangle, the research problem is the most important thing. You need to think about what is the problem here, what is the bigger problem here, and then you think about your research question. So if you think about your research question, you have drafted a very well written research question. It's like a Ferrari car. But if you're working in a context where the Ferrari car can't drive, think about the roads. So as you can see, this particular road, there are lots of bumps. So research question will not help you to go very far. So that's a problem. So when you are writing a research question, you really need to think about the context. You need to think about how I'm going to use this information, and whether this question will be able to answer or not. I think this will make more sense as I go along with in my presentation. So before you even start writing your research question, you need to start thinking about your research problem. And now, these are some of the questions you should talk about or ask about your research problem.
सर हिंदी में समझाइए प्लीज, रिक्वेस्ट है सर, समझ में नहीं आ रहा इंग्लिश।
ठीक है, मैं हिंदी में भी बोलता हूँ साथ साथ। तो मैं ये कहना चाहता हूं कि जिस टाइम आप अपना रिसर्च क्वेश्चन लिखने लगते हैं, रिसर्च क्वेश्चन लिखने से पहले आपको ये सोचना चाहिए कि रिसर्च प्रॉब्लम क्या है. और I want to know, one thing I do want to know when I start speaking in Hindi, is it possible that some people may not understand who do not even understand Hindi as well? So should I try to mix both Hindi and English?
Request a mix of both.
Okay.
Request a mix of both, please. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so when you start doing a research, the moment you enroll in your PhD program or you are going to start a new research, there are some of the important questions you have to ask. तो जब आप अपना रिसर्च शुरू करने लगते हैं, 5 या 6 इंपॉर्टेंट क्वेश्चन आपको पूछना चाहिए अपने आप से. पहला क्वेश्चन है, why do I want to use this topic? Why am I interested in this particular topic? दूसरा क्वेश्चन आपको पूछना चाहिए कि what are policy or practice implications? So is there any policy right now in your country, or how is it going to help in some way with the practice of related to this particular aspect? Question is, am I trying to find just problems? So that's the third very important question. क्या मैं सिर्फ प्रॉब्लम से आइडेंटिफाई करूंगा या मैं कुछ सॉल्यूशंस भी बताने वाला हूं इसके मेरी रिसर्च की वजह से? So that's another important question you need to ask. And the fourth question is, do I know enough about the past research on the topic? So as you start doing, before you decide a topic, आपको ये question भी बहुत जरूरी है कि आप ऑलरेडी पता है आपको उस टॉपिक के बारे में कि बाकी लोगों ने क्या जानकारी प्राप्त की है. Next question is, what theoretical framework will guide my research? So what are the theories behind this thing? What do next question is, how will I keep the context in mind? तो what I'm telling you is, आपको ये भी ध्यान रखना है कि आप एक रिसर्च प्रॉब्लम तो बहुत अच्छी है, लेकिन ये क्या रिसर्च प्रॉब्लम हमारी कंट्री के लिए अच्छी है या हमारी स्टेट के लिए अच्छी है या नहीं, ये बहुत जरूरी है. इसको फॉर एग्जांपल रिसर्च कुड बी रियली गुड फॉर ऑस्ट्रेलियन कॉन्टेक्स्ट, लेकिन हो सकता है इंडिया के लिए इट्स नॉट सच अ गुड टॉपिक. So you need to keep that in mind as you start doing your own research project. I'll give you more example as I go ahead, okay? So some questions that all PhD students should ask about their research question. पहला question है, why do I want to research this topic? So पहला question ये होता है कि जब आपका रिसर्च सुपरवाइजर पूछता है कि आप क्यों करना चाहते हैं इस रिसर्च के ऊपर टॉपिक, दो चीजें बोलते हैं बच्चा कि मेरे को बहुत I really like this topic, so that's why I want to do it. So you need to have a passion, but you need to be realistic. I mean, अगर आपका बहुत ज़्यादा you really want to, people can have a passion because they might have a brother, sister, or a son with a disability. That's why they want to do it. Or they might have another reason. You could be a policy maker and you are interested कि मैं देखना चाहता हूँ कि whether this policy will work in my context or not. So what you want to do is you want to have a passion, but you need to be realistic. That's the very first thing. The second thing is, what are the policy and practice implications? So if you start doing a project, I would strongly recommend, think about, can you at least think of one policy within on your area that will be relevant to your research question or to the topic that you are investigating. So my example, I will give you more example जैसे जैसे मैं आगे जाता जाऊंगा अपनी presentation के अंदर. आपको ये सोचना बहुत जरूरी है कि मेरी रिसर्च से रिलेटेड कोई ऐसा what is happening in Australia, in your country, in your state, and is there any particular policy that might apply to your own research? And that why I will tell you why this is important, because if you do a research that is relevant to your own country, or your context, your state, people tend to look at it and they apply what they learn from your research. And the next one is, do I know enough about the past research? जैसे मैंने आपको पहले भी बताया कि अगर आप एक नया रिसर्च करना शुरू करते हैं, आप बोलेंगे कि मैं ये पता करना चाहता हूं कि whether this thing happens or does not happen, or is this a problem. If somebody has already done it, then it's not a good topic, because what it means, people have already looked at that topic, and then you are saying, I'm going to research and tell you more about this. Ideally speaking, you should do a very good literature review before you can come across, or you say that this is what I am interested in finding about this. So do a literature review before you launch into a topic. Now, this is very important for people who are doing their PhD research. I mean, this is very important when in Australia, जब भी हमारे यहाँ पे कोई भी student start करने लगता है, तो हम उससे पूछते हैं भाई तुम्हारा theoretical framework क्या है? What is the theoretical framework that's guiding your PhD? So you know, when you this is a very, very important question we ask. But people say, what is the theoretical framework? So a theoretical framework is where you define, discuss, and evaluate theories relevant to your topic. And I'll give you an example of a theoretical framework for one of my research projects where my student applied this framework in his project. But just to give you an answer, if you really want to know what is a theoretical framework, अगर आप कोई भी अपना topic कर रहे हैं, अपना research question देखेंगे, and there might be some construct you are using. For example, my research, I was looking at attitudes. And when I went to a conference, somebody asked me, Umesh, tell me, what is your theoretical framework in your project? So what I had to tell to that person is why I am looking at attitudes. I not say, is there any theory that help you to decide why you are interested in looking at attitudes? It will not make a really good sense. So one of the projects that we did, or one of my doctoral students did, he was interested in looking at the attitudes of school teachers in Bangladesh. But he just did not only look at attitudes, उसने सिर्फ attitudes को नहीं देखा और दो तीन चीजें और भी देखी. उसने उनके intentions के बारे में पता करने की कोशिश की. उसने ये भी जानना चाहा कि बाकी के स्कूलों के अंदर लोगों का attitude कैसा है और लोगों का attitudes कैसे influence होता है, कि कौन-कौन से factors हैं जिसकी वजह से उनके attitude change होते हैं और या influence होते हैं. This was one of the theory he was using. It's called theory of planned behavior. I want to give you an example. What does it mean? Just to give you an example, if you are doing a research, so just to explain you what is this theory of planned behavior. If you are doing a research, you know, there are lots of people who look at attitudes of teachers about disability. But if you ask them why are you looking at attitudes, you might find they find it difficult to explain why they are looking at the attitudes of teachers. So this might be a good theoretical framework for you to explain why I'm interested in looking at the attitudes of teachers in my country or my context. Attitudes are something like, you know, if you look at this figure, it left side mein hai, attitude can influence your intention. Or attitudes are something, if you say I like driving, it's going to influence how likely you are going to drive cars on a road. Attitudes can also influence attitudes, but एक चीज बहुत ज़्यादा आपको ध्यान रखनी चाहिए, attitude itself is not enough. Attitudes के अलावा और भी दो तीन चीजें होती हैं जिसकी वजह से किसी का actual behavior can be influenced. For example, Bangladesh, I mean, I want to give an example from Saudi Arabia. You may have a very positive attitude to driving, like you like driving cars. You can also know how to drive, so that's the perceived behavior control, where you say you know how to drive a car. You got all the lessons. You've gone to learn about driving a car in different, like from a instructor. But the problem is others don't approve. Like आपकी country के अंदर अगर दूसरे लोगों को ये चीज पसंद नहीं है कि तुम आप drive करें, तो your intention to drive may not be as strong. So you may have a positive attitude. You may have very high efficacy, like you can drive the car, but others do not like you to drive. That will influence your intention to drive. So because of that, so all those three things are important for you to say. If you want to see teachers' behavior about whether they will include a child or not, you need to know whether what kind of attitudes they have, whether they have skills or not, like whether they have efficacy or they know the skills or not, knowledge about this area. And as well as other teachers in their school, do they like this idea of including the child or not? So in this way, the theory helps you to identify what are the important things you should be asking about a question. So I hope that makes some sense. If it does not, I'm more than happy to answer questions later on. The second most important thing is you should always, in my view, look at solution-oriented problems rather than only problems that do not tell you where to go next. So what I mean is, कभी भी आप research problem जो सी होती हैं उसको दो तरीके से देख सकते हैं. एक तो what's wrong in our system, but the other problem could be, I know there are something wrong in most systems, but what are the solutions to those problems? So it's not always कि क्या हमारी country या हमारे state या हमारे schools में क्या चीज काम नहीं कर रही है. हमें ये भी देखना चाहिए कि क्या कुछ हमारी चीजें हमारे स्कूलों में कुछ ऐसी चीजें जो काम भी कर रही हैं. तो what are the strengths in our system? So that's what it means. You always, in my view, should look at the strengths of the system rather than only the problems of a system. So these are the two problems, like two research questions. One of them is more optimistic, another is more pessimistic. So optimistic is, what can we learn about inclusive practices from teachers who have successfully included students with disabilities in their classrooms in primary schools of South Delhi, India? The same problem could be more pessimistic. What concerns teachers about including students with intellectual disabilities in primary schools of South Delhi? So dono problem, even though they're looking at the same problem, one problem allows you to look for solutions. The other problem only allows you to look at the problems. So I hope you can see my viewpoint. What I mean to say, you need to both look at the solutions as well as problems rather than just looking at problems, if it makes sense. The next point is context is extremely critical. So आप कभी भी कोई research करें, आपको ये सोचना बहुत जरूरी है कि if I'm going to do this research in India or in say Maharashtra, whatever I'm going to do, will that thing be relevant to my context or not? So समझिए कि अगर आप लोग मान लो there is a very good intervention that Australia has tried. The intervention requires a lot of funding. And then you say, well, I want to try whether that intervention will work in Maharashtra. The problem is, Maharashtra, there may not be enough funding. So what I want to say, you need to really think about the context. So मैं ये कहना चाहता हूँ कि कभी भी आप कोई रिसर्च क्वेश्चन अपना फ्रेज करें तो आपको अपना कॉन्टेक्स्ट सोचना बहुत जरूरी है. तो आप सोचेंगे महाराष्ट्र में मैं रिसर्च करने वाला हूँ, महाराष्ट्र में आपको सोचना होगा यहाँ पे कौन कौन सी पॉलिसीज हैं, क्या रिसोर्सेज हैं, उन्हीं के हिसाब से आपको डिसाइड करना चाहिए कि क्या क्वेश्चन मेरे कॉन्टेक्स्ट के लिए ज्यादा अच्छा रहेगा. सो अगर if you want to think about inclusive education in India, you must keep our languages in mind, you must keep our culture in mind, we must keep our values in mind, and then decide how do you go about doing your research. So if we do not keep those things in mind, it's important that you may come up with some idea that may not be contextually relevant or sensitive to the context where you're conducting the research. I just want to quote here, we say respect yourself and the others will respect you. Why I'm saying this thing is, people in India, or like I'm not saying people in India, most countries, when there is an approach, we tend to get ideas, attracted to ideas coming from Western countries quite quickly. And we forget that we might have lots of good ideas in our country as well. So what I want to say is, think about कि क्या हमारे कॉन्टेक्स्ट के अंदर, हमारे कल्चर के अंदर, हमारी हिस्ट्री के अंदर क्या कुछ ऐसी प्रैक्टिसेस हैं जिनके बेसिस पे we can make our system, our schools more, we can use the strength of our system to make it more inclusive and make it more meaningful for what we are doing in our context. So I want to ask you this question from all of you about my research problem when I started with my PhD. I remember I was looking at, if you might recall, I was looking at what's happening in India in terms of inclusion of children with disabilities or intellectual disabilities. My question I changed as a result of when I spoke with my supervisor. He says, you need to be more specific, you need to have a more researchable topic. So he says, rather than just looking at attitudes, can you think of something else? Why teachers have negative attitudes and what can you do about it? So the main thing that happened as a result of this, it helped me to think about not just attitudes, but attitudes को change कैसे किया जा सकता है. तो उसके लिए I started another aspect where I said, what concerns teachers? अगर हम लोग teachers के concerns address करें, क्या can they become more positive about inclusion? So both things were going side by side. Teachers don't have negative attitudes for no reason. Teachers have negative attitudes because they have concerns. They are worried about something. So that made a more holistic approach where you started thinking about, okay, you need to do both, not just one thing. But I still think if अगर मेरे को आज अगर ये research दोबारा करनी पड़े तो maybe I'll do something even better, differently from what I did many years ago. So how do I rate my PhD during that time? I was passionate and realistic. I really wanted to work on that topic, so I'll rate very highly on that. It was policy driven. उस time हिंदुस्तान के अंदर there was a legislation called Persons with Disabilities Act, which required all schools to start integrating students with disabilities, or at least 6 to 7 categories. So there was a policy that really helped me, because I said अगर schools को ऐसा करना है, क्या teachers तैयार हैं, क्या school principals तैयार हैं inclusion करने के लिए? It was solution oriented, but it could be better. We can look for more solution. My topic could have been even better. Theoretical framework जो एक question था, काफी देर तक मेरे को नहीं पता था. It's only 1 या 2 साल के बाद जब मैं किसी कॉन्फ्रेंस में गया, कब किसी ने one of the audience asked me, can you please tell me what is your theoretical framework, and I struggled that time. But after some time I started thinking about why I'm interested in attitudes, and then I started thinking about it's not just attitudes, but there are other aspects of attitudes I was interested in. Then you start thinking about theories. So that helped you to think about this. Context, context to some extent I was interested, but I could do better now, because अगर मैं दोबारा research करना तो मैं हमारे system में क्या हुआ है, what can we learn from different religions, what can we learn from different values, and how can we integrate them in coming up with solutions. So this is what I learned about. So remember 5 things. Passion, you need to be passionate and realistic. Think about a policy-driven issues. Think about some solution-oriented research questions. Think about a good theoretical framework and the context. All 5 things should decide how do you go about deciding a research topic. Now, the chapter 2 of my life starts when I became a career researcher. I started thinking about not PhD student. Now I started working in university. And when you are in universities, you are an academic, you are a lecturer or senior lecturer or associate professor, things change, because at this time, again, you start talking about, you learn from your supervisors. Now, one of the important things you learn during this time is this lesson. They say, Umesh, you need to publish or you will perish. I think जितने भी academics हैं सबको ये बोला जाता है, या तो आप publish कीजिए, अगर आप publish नहीं करेंगे तो you will perish. University के अंदर, I think most academics everywhere in the world talk about this. So you have an idea, you research that idea, you write about this idea, you publish. Then you come up with, and you keep doing this cycle, and then you start publishing and publishing. But what I learned, actually, this is not enough. And now we know that you can publish, but still you can perish. And what do I mean?
But he's gone again. We'll set it up with her.
What it means is, I don't know how many of you know about this. 80% of the research papers that people write, they are never cited. Like no one is going to read your paper. They will not cite that anywhere in your research. So इसका मतलब ये हुआ कि आप रिसर्च तो कर रहे हैं, लेकिन बाकी के लोग ना तो उसको पढ़ रहे हैं, ना उसको अपने रिसर्च के अंदर यूज कर रहे हैं. तो this is what universities have started talking about. They say you need to conduct high impact research and publish in high impact journals. So what they say is, अगर आप कोई रिसर्च करें तो प्लीज ऐसी रिसर्च करें जिसको लोग आपको पढ़ना भी चाहें, आपसे समझना चाहें और अपने काम के अंदर यूज भी करना चाहें. तो यहाँ पर that's where people start talking about doing high impact research. तो इस दरमियान लोग इस तरीके की बातें करते हैं कि पब्लिश, शुरू में जब रिसर्च स्टूडेंट होते हो कि पब्लिश करो, नेक्स्ट बोलते हैं पब्लिश और पेरिश. उसके बाद जैसे जैसे करियर बढ़ता जाता है आगे कहते हैं पब्लिश इन हाई इम्पैक्ट जर्नल्स और पेरिश. अब कहते हैं पब्लिश फ्रीक्वेंटली इन हाई इम्पैक्ट जर्नल्स एंड मे बी यू वोंट पेरिश, बिकॉज पब्लिश के साथ साथ आपको कोशिश करते रहना है कि लोगों को आपकी रिसर्च से इन्फ्लुएंस भी हो रहा है. समथिंग शुड बी चेंजिंग. तो दिस इज व्हाट यू लर्न इन एकेडेमिया. लाइक PhD is a starting point, but as you grow, you need to start thinking about what's next and how do I make a difference? How does my research make a difference? So what I learned in my mid-career, that if I had an hour, this is Einstein talks about, I think this is such a good thing for academics or जो लोग universities में काम कर रहे हैं उनके लिए, if you had an hour to solve a problem and my life depended on it, I would use the first 55 minutes to determine the proper questions to ask. तो अगर आप लोग जितने भी हैं यहाँ पे, एक ही रिक्वेस्ट मैं आपको करना चाहूंगा कि टेक योर टाइम, डोंट रश टू डिसाइड योर रिसर्च क्वेश्चन, जल्दीबाजी ना करें, क्योंकि एक गुड रिसर्च क्वेश्चन विल हेल्प यू टू टेक लॉन्ग वे इन योर जर्नी. अगर आपने जल्दबाजी में रिसर्च क्वेश्चन डिसाइड किया, it will not be a really good thing. So what I say, what Einstein said, it is so true. When you start thinking about it, think about your research question very carefully. And these are some of the things that in my view, number one, get some ideas. High impact journals want papers that have high impact value and they attract wider audience. Number one, papers that bring a new perspective to an older problem. So research journals हैं अच्छे, उनको चाहिए, they want good articles in their journals. They want to see कि लोगों ने अच्छा रिसर्च किया हुआ, उसी को वो पब्लिश करते हैं आजकल. The most important thing I think most editors do, they look at what is your research question that you have done. अगर मान लो आपका रिसर्च क्वेश्चन पढ़ते हैं, वो कहते हैं अरे यार ये तो बहुत पुराना क्वेश्चन है और 100 में इतने सारे लोगों ने इस क्वेश्चन को देखा हुआ, तो you are not going to get published in good journal. So what I'm asking you to do is think about your research question very, very carefully as you go along this journey. And if you have decided about a research question, the next thing is have a very good, strong literature review, methodology and discussion. So वो तीनों चीजें बाद में बहुत ज़्यादा जरूरी हो जाती हैं. आजकल, if you are interested in doing a research, what you can do is you can look at first, अगर आपने पब्लिश करना चाहते हैं कि कौन से जर्नल में मैं पब्लिश करूं और कौन से ऑथर्स हैं जिनको मैं फॉलो अप करूं, you can go and look at authors H index matters. Like H index, what it means is जो लोग पब्लिश कर रहे हैं हर फील्ड के अंदर, उनके जो पेपर्स पब्लिश होते हैं, कितने लोग उनके पेपर्स को साइट करते हैं. इसका मतलब what is the H index of that author, what is the H index of a journal. So जो जर्नल्स अच्छे होते हैं इंटरनेशनली, उनकी रैंकिंग भी ज्यादा ऊंची होती है, तो उनका इम्पैक्ट फैक्टर ज्यादा होता है, उनको ज्यादा लोग पढ़ रहे हैं. तो यू शुड ऑल्सो डू द सेम थिंग. अगर व्हेन आप यू स्टार्ट योर रिसर्च जर्नी, अगर आप अभी स्टार्ट किए हैं अपना पीएचडी प्रोजेक्ट, यू शुड गो एंड लुक एट सम ऑफ द टॉप जर्नल्स, एंड उन जर्नल्स के अंदर आपको जाके देखना चाहिए कि इस जर्नल के अंदर सबसे ज्यादा डाउनलोडेड आर्टिकल कौन सा था, सबसे ज्यादा आर्टिकल को किसने पढ़ा है और क्यों पढ़ा होगा इस कारण इसको. तो अगर एक होमवर्क आई वांट टू गिव यू व्हेन यू गो बैक होम, आप वो वाले जर्नल्स आइडेंटिफाई करें जो आपके फील्ड में हैं, और उस फील्ड के अंदर जाके देखिए कि सबसे ज्यादा मोस्ट डाउनलोडेड आर्टिकल कौन सा है, और उस आर्टिकल को पढ़िए कि क्यों ये वाला आर्टिकल और क्यों इतने सारे लोग इसको साइट कर रहे हैं. तो यू विल गेट टू लर्न अबाउट फ्यू ऑफ द इम्पोर्टेंट थिंग्स अबाउट दैट पर्टिकुलर जर्नल. Or some of the things that you should also think about, examine the focus of the most cited articles. So I want to give you some examples here. So agar aap jahen International Journal of Inclusive Education, one of the articles that is top cited in that journal is Regular Primary School Teachers' Attitudes Toward Inclusive Education, a review of the literature. And you have to think about why this article could be so much cited. And one of the things I can tell you from my experience, people really like to read systematic literature reviews. इसका मेन फायदा ये होता है ऐसा आर्टिकल पढ़ने से, उनको जो भी पढ़ता है उसको पता लग जाता है कि एटीट्यूड के ऊपर जितनी रिसर्च हुई है पूरे वर्ल्ड के अंदर, उसका मेन सार क्या है, व्हाट इज द मेन फाइंडिंग्स कमिंग आउट ऑफ दोज पेपर्स. So such papers get cited a lot. So for example, this paper is cited 137 times. So 137 बार दूसरे लोगों ने इसको अपनी रिसर्च के अंदर यूज किया है. So that's the reason it is so cited so much. Or we were fortunate to have one of our papers cited in one of the journals, Disability and Society, for few years. In this journal, what we did, this article, हमने देखा कि 3-4 कंट्री के अंदर, ऑस्ट्रेलिया, कनाडा, हांगकांग and one other country, anyways, four countries, प्री सर्विस टीचर्स जो होते हैं, जो यूनिवर्सिटीज के टीचर होते हैं, उनका एटीट्यूड, कंसर्न और सेंटिमेंट में क्या रिलेशनशिप है. क्योंकि इस पेपर के अंदर 3-4 कंट्री का पर्सपेक्टिव था, 3-4 डिफरेंट चीजें हम देख रहे थे, और हमारी नई अप्रोच थी. ये एक भी कारण हो सकता है कि लोग इस पेपर को ज्यादा पढ़ रहे हैं. तो दिस पेपर इज साइटेड नाउ 161 टाइम्स एंड डाउनलोडेड 10,000 टाइम्स. सो व्हाट आई वांट टू से इज, जब लोग इन पेपर्स को पढ़ते हैं तो आपको ये सोचना चाहिए कि क्या कारण है कि कुछ क्वेश्चन के अंदर लोगों को ज्यादा इंटरेस्ट है. एंड समटाइम्स अगर आपको ये भी, जो आप जो academics हैं, people who want to publish, they really need to think about what is the reason that some articles get more, editors like those articles. One thing is, अगर आपके title of the paper is interesting, so there was एक paper हमने लिखा था, उसमें लिखा कि can I really teach without my magic cane? तो इसका main शीर्षक था कि एक टीचर पूछ रहा है कि क्या मैं अपने डंडे के बिना पढ़ा पाऊंगा कि अपनी क्लास के अंदर, और टीचर्स रिस्पॉन्सेज टू द बैनिंग ऑफ कॉर्पोरल पनिशमेंट. सो इस पेपर के अंदर हमने बांग्लादेश से डेटा कलेक्ट किया था कि टीचर से पूछा कि भी आप कैसे पढ़ाते हो, और जब पनिशमेंट आपकी यहाँ पर बांग्लादेश में अलाउ नहीं है तो कैसे, व्हाट आर सम ऑफ द प्रॉब्लम्स यू हैव. तो उस पेपर का से हमने टाइटल ही ऐसा रखा कि एडिटर को बहुत अच्छा लगा. तो समटाइम इवन एडिटर्स लाइक इट, समटाइम पीपल लाइक टू रीड इट. Even the paper is not cited that many times, but I think it gives you some ideas. It enhances the chances of your paper being accepted if you think like this. So I hope कि आपको कुछ ideas मिल रहे हैं इससे कि आपको क्या करना चाहिए कि आपका paper publish हो. Now I'm going to the third chapter of my academic career, where what I have learned in the last few years of my academic career. So as an editor of Oxford Research Encyclopedia in Education, as well as editor of Australian Journal of Special and Inclusive Education, I would here like to acknowledge few people who are going to participate. आपकी जो conference हो रही है उसमें कुछ लोग उस जर्नल से, जो हमारी जो ऑक्सफोर्ड यूनिवर्सिटी का encyclopedia है उसमें से आपके साथ they are going to say, I think they are part of this conference. Is going to speak. Dr. Richard Rose is going to speak. I think Amitabh Mishra might also be speaking. So what I want to acknowledge their contribution as well here. So who are part of this journey, and उसमें काफी सारे लोगों ने इंडिया, बांग्लादेश इस रीजन से भी पब्लिश किया है, क्योंकि we want people from that region to write about the topics too. So I want to tell you something very important. When we reach, like when you have Oxford Encyclopedia, and when we have, you can only have, like we can put only have 100 articles. उसके अंदर हमें ये जरूरी था कि हम 100 से ज्यादा आर्टिकल नहीं ले सकते. और सेम थिंग वही है कि जब हम एडिटर, when I'm editing a journal, we really want very good articles. We want to look at the abstract and we want to look at titles. So just keep one thing in mind: editors don't have a lot of time. They are interested in publishing something really good. So आपको क्या करना होगा, बहुत सुंदर सा टाइटल सोचें अपने पेपर का, अच्छा सा एब्स्ट्रैक्ट बनाएं और उसके बाद सबमिट करें, क्योंकि जल्दबाजी ना करें उसके अंदर. आई थिंक दिस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग. एडिटर्स जो होते हैं आपके पेपर का पहले 2 या 3 इंट्रोडक्शन वाला पैराग्राफ जल्दी पढ़ेंगे और उनको अंदाजा लगेगा कि इस पेपर को पब्लिश करना चाहिए या नहीं. तो स्पेंड लॉट ऑफ टाइम in writing a very good introduction, make a really good case why you want to publish this paper. So it's really important to bring इस पेपर के अंदर जो भी आप सबमिट करने लगते हैं, अच्छा आर्टिकल हो, अच्छा एब्स्ट्रैक्ट हो, लेकिन पहले 2-3 पैराग्राफ्स के अंदर आपको उनकी अटेंशन पकड़नी है, यानी एडिटर को लगना चाहिए अरे वाह क्या बढ़िया पेपर है, इसको जरूर पब्लिश करना होगा हमको अपने जर्नल के अंदर. नेक्स्ट इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग हमें जो पता लगी है कि जितने भी इंटरनेशनल जर्नल देर लाइक वो वाले पेपर जिसका हाई रेलिवेंस हो किसी टाइम पर, और दूसरा जो इंटरनेशनल कोलैबोरेशन है. तो मैं अभी बता सकता हूँ, इफ यू हैव अ वेरी गुड पेपर जिसके अंदर आप ये बताना चाहते हैं कि कोविड-19 जो आज की डेट में हो रहा है पूरे वर्ल्ड के अंदर, इसने किसी ना किसी तरीके से इट हैज अफेक्टेड पीपल. तो अगर आपके अपनी रिसर्च से कुछ भी आप करना चाहते हैं रिलेटेड टू कोविड-19, अगर आप पेपर अभी सबमिट करेंगे उस बारे में, एडिटर्स को ज्यादा अच्छा लगेगा. अगर आपके पुराने पेपर्स हैं जो अभी कोविड-19 के बारे में नहीं लिख रहे, एडिटर्स विल बी लिटिल रिलक्टेंट. दे रियली वांट ऐसे टॉपिक्स इस टाइम जो सब लोग पढ़ना चाहेंगे. सो कोविड-19 एंड इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन इज अ वेरी गुड टॉपिक टू राइट अबाउट. अगर आपके पास कुछ डेटा है तो आपके यहाँ टीचर्स कैसे रिस्पॉन्ड कर रहे हैं, क्या प्रॉब्लम्स हो रही हैं, इस तरीके के पेपर्स इस टाइम बहुत ज्यादा लोगों को अच्छे लगेंगे पढ़ने के लिए. एंड द नेक्स्ट थिंग आई लर्नड कि थिंग्स दैट आई लर्न ड्यूरिंग पीएचडी इवन मैटर नाउ, यानी कि जो आपने पीएचडी के टाइम जो सीखा था ना वो अभी भी बिल्कुल ट्रू है. यानी दैट दोज थिंग्स that you learn during PhD will still remain there. They are very important and you don't forget those things. So lessons you build upon जो आपने PhD में सीखा वही मिड करियर रिसर्चर में चलेगा, वही आगे चलता चला जाएगा. तो वो चीजें कभी भी नहीं भूलती हैं. तो don't forget, keep your notes ready. What you are learning in your PhD, that will help you as you grow in your career. And I want to highlight some of the important things that I have discussed today. Number one, research question and research problem are two different things. The most important thing you need to think about is think about your research problem first and then start drafting your research question. Okay. Also very important, जल्दबाजी ना करें अपना research question decide करने में, अपना time लगाएं, जानने की कोशिश करें भाई बाकी लोगों ने क्या लिखा हुआ है, फिर ही उसके बाद ही आपको डिसाइड करना चाहिए कि मैं किस रिसर्च के ऊपर काम करने वाला हूं. जल्दबाजी बिल्कुल भी ना करें. 5 things that makes a good research problem. Number 1, आपको passionate, P means passionate and realistic होना चाहिए. Number 2, पॉलिसी ड्रिवन होना चाहिए, यानी कौन सी पॉलिसी है आपके यहाँ पर कंट्री में या स्टेट में जो आपको आपका रिसर्च ड्राइव करेगी. आइडियली स्पीकिंग इट शुड बी सॉल्यूशन ओरिएंटेड. यही नहीं कि प्रॉब्लम क्या है, आपको ये भी देखना चाहिए कि इसको किस तरीके से सॉल्व किया जा सकता है. आपके रिसर्च में आपको ये भी देखना चाहिए. फोर्थ थिंग, इट मस्ट हैव अ T मींस थ्योरेटिकल फ्रेमवर्क. आपको पता होना चाहिए कि कौन सी थ्योरी है जो मेरे रिसर्च क्वेश्चंस को ड्राइव करेगी. बहुत ज्यादा जरूरी है. और लास्ट थिंग इज कॉन्टेक्स्ट. आपको सोचना हो अगर मैं ये रिसर्च अपनी कंट्री में, अपने राज्य में, महाराष्ट्र में करने वाला हूं, तो यहाँ का कॉन्टेक्स्ट बहुत ज्यादा जरूरी है. चाहे वो रिसर्च किसी और कंट्री में हुई हो, आपको अपना कॉन्टेक्स्ट बहुत ज्यादा जरूरी सोचना पड़ेगा कि यहाँ पर किस तरीके से उस वाले प्रॉब्लम को अप्लाई किया जाएगा. नेक्स्ट थिंग इज यू कैन पब्लिश एंड स्टिल पेरिश. सो व्हाट इट मीन्स, आपको आज की डेट में, पुराने जमाने में बोलते थे कि भाई पब्लिश करो, लेकिन अब हमें पता लगा कि पब्लिश करना ही काफी नहीं है. आपको पब्लिश भी करना है, उसके साथ ऐसा पब्लिश करना है जिसको लोग पढ़ना चाहें, जो आपकी रिसर्च को पढ़ के लोगों को ज्यादा साइट भी करें और अपनी रिसर्च में यूज करें. और नेक्स्ट थिंग आई वांट टू टॉक अबाउट इज पेपर टाइटल्स, एब्स्ट्रैक्ट एंड इंट्रोडक्शंस आर क्रिटिकल व्हेन पब्लिशिंग अ पेपर. सो जब आप अपना पेपर सबमिट करते हैं, आपको इन चीजों का ध्यान रखना चाहिए. अच्छा सा पेपर का टाइटल हो, एब्स्ट्रैक्ट बिल्कुल क्लियर हो और इंट्रोडक्शन बिल्कुल क्रिस्टल क्लियर हो, जिसको पढ़ के एडिटर को लगे हाँ भी इस पेपर को पब्लिश करना चाहिए. इंटरनेशनल कोलैबोरेशन एंड हाई रेलेवेंस पेपर्स. तो आपको सोचना चाहिए आजकल क्या चल रहा है, व्हाट इज द मोस्ट इंपोर्टेंट थिंग हैपनिंग राइट नाउ. कोविड-19 है, इससे रिलेटेड कोई पेपर लिखेंगे जल्दी चला जाएगा, जल्दी उसको एक्सेप्टेंस मिलेगी. एंड next thing is good research question is good research question whether you are a PhD student, a mid career researcher or anything else. ये भी आपको याद रखना चाहिए. I'm coming to the end of my presentation. एक मैं quote आपको share करना चाहता हूँ for all of you. We have been consumers of research for far too long. It's time we became producers of new knowledge. Use our history to guide our investigative journey. So, talking from my experience, when I was in India, I used to read lots of journal articles. लेकिन प्रॉब्लम ये थी, जर्नल आर्टिकल जितना भी मैं पढ़ता था, रिसर्च बाहर की कंट्री में मैं देखता था बहुत अच्छी हो रही है. इट विल बी रियली गुड कि आप सब लोग जो हिंदुस्तान के अंदर इस टाइम पार्टिसिपेट कर रहे हैं इस रिसर्च फोरम में, आप सबको सोचना चाहिए कि क्या हम ऐसे रिसर्च पेपर नहीं लिख सकते जिनको पढ़ के बाहर के लोगों को पता लगे कि कैसे, हाउ टू डू गुड रिसर्च and find solutions to problem even that the Western countries are finding very difficult to deal with. So think about outside the square, come up with some really good research question, come up with some solutions that country like Australia can learn from India. That's the very important thing we should be doing as we start doing new projects. And I want to finish with this quote by Swami Vivekananda. He says, take risks in your life. If you win, you can lead. If you lose, you can guide. But I think take risk is very important, but take calculated risk. Think of some really good research question and people will be very interested to hear about what you have to say. I think people have been asking me, what is your email? Here is my email and also my office number. So over to you now.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma.
You're most welcome.
Thank you very much for keeping it well within the time. We were worried that, we started a bit late, but you have helped us by making up for the time. Thank you very much for it. And it was quite interesting that you had given a different perspective of how research should be approached. So it's very interesting to know that, the same definition of research, how it would differ from whom you are or where you are. It was very quite amazing if we look at the journey you have gone through. Thank you very much. In case any of our participants have any questions, we would probably pass it on to you. We would not engage ourselves in a detailed question and answer session right now. So thank you very much, sir, for your time. Yeah.
You're most welcome. Thank you.